The clang of metal echoed through the quiet garage as Ethan wiped his hands on the same old rag he always used, trying to get the stubborn grease off his fingers. It wasn't working, but it never did. Grease was part of him now, just like the scent of motor oil and the hum of engines that filled every corner of the workshop. The day had been long, and he was ready to close up. Maybe grab a late dinner and watch whatever old movie was on TV. He reached for the light switch just as the door creaked open. He turned, expecting a customer who had lost track of time, or maybe someone with an emergency engine problem. Instead, he saw her. She stepped inside with a kind of quiet confidence that didn't match her clothes. Her jeans were dusted with a faint layer of road dirt. Her sneakers looked well-worn, and her simple white shirt wasn't the kind of thing people wore to impress. Yet there was something about her, something that made Ethan straighten without even thinking about it. Her eyes were bright, alive, curious in a way that caught him completely off guard. It was as if she brought light into the dim garage just by standing there. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked at him with a smile so unexpectedly warm that he almost forgot to breathe. She seemed nervous but trying to hide it. Before he could ask if she needed help with her car, she stepped closer and spoke with a voice soft but steady. "Will you be my date for the weekend?" Ethan blinked, certain he had misheard her. No one had ever walked into his garage and asked something like that. He looked around instinctively, half expecting a camera crew to jump out and shout that it was a prank. But there was nothing except the quiet hum of the cooling machinery and her waiting eyes. "Are you serious?" he asked carefully, wiping the rest of the grease off his hands, even though he knew they were still smudged. She nodded, looking almost relieved that he had spoken. "I know this sounds strange," she said, shifting from one foot to the other, "but I need someone to go with me to an engagement party. My cousin's. It's complicated, and I really don't want to show up alone. I thought maybe you wouldn't mind." Her explanation didn't make it any less bizarre. She didn't look like someone who should have trouble finding a date. She was beautiful in a natural, effortless way, and there was a kind of openness about her that made her easy to look at, easy to trust. But showing up alone to a family event wasn't a problem big enough to walk into a mechanic's shop and ask a stranger to accompany her, especially not with that soft but desperate tone. Ethan studied her for a moment. He had been asked unusual things in his life, but nothing like this. Her request lingered in the air, fragile and bold at the same time. She seemed like someone who wasn't used to asking for favors. But right now she was putting herself out there in a way that made him feel protective without even knowing why. "Why me?" he finally asked, genuinely confused. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then let out a small, nervous laugh. "Honestly, you just look like someone who wouldn't make a big deal out of it," she admitted. "Someone real. Someone who won't ask too many questions. Someone who won't judge me." She swallowed, and her eyes flicked briefly toward the ground. "I really need that right now." Ethan didn't know what to say. He was a simple mechanic, a man who fixed engines and kept to himself. He wasn't the type of person people sought out for last-minute social events. Yet something about her expression, the slight tremble in her voice, touched something inside him. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said quietly. "If you really need someone, I'll go with you." Her entire face brightened with relief. She let out a breath she had been holding. "Thank you," she said with a kind of sincerity that made his chest tighten. "You have no idea how much this helps." She stayed for a few minutes, giving him the address, the time, and explaining that it would be a nice weekend event. Nothing too fancy. She emphasized that he didn't need to dress formally, just look presentable. She apologized several times for the strange request, and every time Ethan told her it was fine, even though part of him still couldn't believe any of this was happening. Just before she left, she paused at the doorway and turned back to him with one more shy smile. "I'm Alexandra, by the way," she said. "I'll pick you up Saturday morning." He nodded again, and she disappeared into the evening light. The moment she stepped outside, the smell of cool air and faint perfume lingered in the shop. Ethan exhaled, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He went back to cleaning up, but his mind wasn't in it anymore. The image of her standing in the doorway kept replaying in his head. He was sweeping the floor when something small caught his eye, a shiny little object near where she had stood. He bent down and picked it up, thinking maybe it was a key or a piece of jewelry. When he turned it over in his hand, his heart skipped. It was a key fob. But not just any key fob. It belonged to one of the most expensive luxury cars on the market, the kind of car only wealthy business owners or celebrities drove. The kind of car no ordinary girl would casually carry in her pocket. He stared at it, stunned. Alexandra. Nothing special, needed someone who wouldn't judge her, but a car like this didn't fit the story she had told him. Not even close. He looked toward the shop door, where she had walked out only minutes earlier, and a quiet unease settled in his chest. Who exactly was she, and what had he just agreed to? The answers would come soon, but not the ones he imagined. Saturday morning arrived too quickly for Ethan. He had barely slept, replaying the moment Alexandra had walked into his garage, and the way she had asked him to be her weekend date, as if it were the most normal request in the world. He had tried to convince himself that he was overthinking everything. She seemed kind, genuine, maybe a little strange, but in a way that made her feel human rather than suspicious. Still, the memory of the luxury car key fob he found on the floor kept scratching at the back of his mind. He had placed it carefully on the workbench with the intention of returning it, if she even came back. But she did. Not only did she come back, she arrived in a car so glossy and flawless, it looked like it had been sculpted out of black glass. The kind of car engineers bragged about? The kind of car millionaires bought because it made a statement, even when parked. The car purred to a stop outside the shop, and Ethan could only stare as she stepped out with that same simple ponytail, the same plain clothes, acting like she had pulled up in an old taxi, instead of a machine worth more than his entire shop. She walked up to him with a slightly embarrassed smile. "I guess I forgot something," she said, glancing around. He handed her the key fob, trying to keep his expression neutral, but she noticed anyway. Her cheeks flushed a soft red. "Please don't make a big deal out of the car," she whispered quickly. "It's just something I had access to, that's all." That was the first sign. Something about her life wasn't something she wanted him to question. And for now, Ethan let it go. The drive started in silence. Ethan had never sat inside a car like this before. Everything from the seats to the dashboard felt smooth, expensive, and intimidating. Alexandra gripped the steering wheel as if trying to hide inside her own hands. She turned on the radio to fill the quiet, then turned it off again a moment later. Her shoulders were tense, her jaw tight, and she kept opening her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but couldn't decide what. He finally broke the silence. "You seem nervous." She blinked, startled, then laughed weakly. "Is it that obvious?" "Only because I'm sitting next to you," he said, glancing at her. "You haven't stopped tapping your fingers since you started the car." She jerked her hand away from the steering wheel and tucked it under her leg. "I didn't even notice." He waited, giving her space, and eventually she sighed and admitted, "I just don't want things to be weird. I didn't want this weekend to feel like an interview." "I'm not interviewing you," he said gently, "but you can talk if you want." She nodded but didn't. Whenever he asked simple questions about her job or family, she dodged them with a smile or a vague answer that felt carefully crafted to reveal nothing. She talked about random topics instead, safe ones, weather, music, coffee preferences. Nothing personal, nothing telling. The more she avoided the topic of her life, the more Ethan knew there was something very big she wasn't ready to reveal. The engagement party was being held at a hillside mansion that overlooked the countryside. The building was massive, designed with columns and balconies and arched windows that looked like they belonged to royalty. Cars lined the driveway, all expensive. People walked across the lawn in tailored suits and glittering dresses. Ethan almost asked her if she'd come to the wrong place, but she parked the car without hesitation. She opened her door and got out quickly, as if afraid he'd ask something she couldn't answer. She brushed her clothes, took a deep breath, and offered him her hand with a shy smile. "Ready?" "No," he said honestly, making her laugh for the first time that morning. Inside, the party was more extravagant than Ethan could have imagined. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. A string quartet played in a corner. People sipped champagne from fragile glass flutes and spoke in low, elegant tones. The moment Alexandra stepped inside, conversations faltered. Heads turned. Eyes widened with something between surprise and curiosity. Some people whispered behind their glasses, not even bothering to hide their stares. Ethan felt the weight of their gazes. These were people who belonged to a different world entirely. Alexandra walked with confidence, but her fingers tightened around his, as if she needed something solid to hold on to. One woman nudged her partner and whispered, "She came. I can't believe she came back." Another murmured, "Do you think she's here to challenge the vote?" Alexandra pretended not to hear any of it. Ethan did not pretend. He heard every word, and each one only deepened the mystery around her. They moved through the room, and people greeted her with hesitation, respect, and thinly veiled fear. No one treated her like an ordinary girl in jeans. They treated her like someone important, someone powerful, someone whose presence could change the temperature of the entire room. Ethan leaned close and whispered, "Do you want to tell me what's going on?" She shook her head quickly. "Not now." Before he could push further, a man approached, older, dressed in a tailored black suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. His posture straightened the moment he saw her. He lowered his gaze slightly, in a gesture that almost looked like a bow. "Miss Alexandra," he said, voice low and respectful, "the board has been searching for you." The murmur in the room instantly changed. More people turned to look. Ethan felt Alexandra tense beside him, felt the air shift around her, as if the floor itself had tilted. "Not here," she said sharply, her voice barely above a whisper. The man hesitated. "But the situation is becoming difficult to contain." Alexandra squeezed Ethan's hand. Hard. "Please excuse us," she said quickly, pulling him away before the man could say another word. Ethan followed, confused and increasingly alarmed. "Alexandra, what is happening?" She didn't answer. She didn't even look at him. She pushed open a door leading to a quiet hallway and hurried through it, her breathing uneven, her steps fast. She didn't stop until they reached a small balcony overlooking the hills. Only then did she turn to him, eyes filled with fear and something else he couldn't name. "I didn't want you to know," she whispered. "Not like this." Before he could speak, voices began echoing down the hallway. "The board is searching for her. She shouldn't have come back. If she takes control again, everything changes." Ethan looked toward the door, then back at her. "No what?" Alexandra opened her mouth to answer. And that was when the balcony door swung open behind them. The balcony door slammed open with such force that it rattled against the wall. Alexandra flinched, instinctively stepping in front of Ethan as if she were shielding him. A security guard stood in the doorway, breathless, eyes flicking between the two of them with urgency, so sharp it felt like the air had split. "Miss Alexandra," he said, voice strained, "you need to come immediately. It is a crisis. Your company is under attack." The words hit Ethan like a blow. Her company, not a job, not a place she worked shifts at. Her company. That single phrase wrapped around his mind like a cold hand. Alexandra's face drained of color. What happened? The guard hesitated, his eyes flicking once to Ethan. Alexandra followed the look and stepped aside, almost defensively. "He stays," she said firmly. "Say it." "Yes, ma'am," he replied, swallowing. "While you've been away, someone from the executive board has initiated a takeover. They're trying to push you out. They've called for an emergency vote claiming you're unfit to lead. They're saying your absence is proof. The acting chairman insisted you were avoiding your responsibilities." Alexandra pressed a hand to her forehead and exhaled slowly as if trying to catch her balance. "So that's their angle," she whispered. "They've been preparing this." The guard nodded. "They planned the timing to coincide with your trip. They assumed you wouldn't return. But now that you're here, you need to address the board immediately or the takeover will pass." Ethan watched her carefully. Alexandra had been nervous all morning, but this was different. She wasn't just anxious. She was terrified. Not of losing money. Not of losing status. Something deeper. Something personal. "Alexandra," Ethan said quietly, stepping closer. "You need to tell me who you really are." She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, the truth seemed to spill out all at once. "I'm the CEO," she said, voice trembling with a vulnerability he hadn't seen before. "Of Kingswell Industries." Ethan's breath caught. He knew that name. Everyone did. Kingswell wasn't just a company. It was a giant. A multinational empire spanning technology, engineering, finance, and innovation. It was the kind of corporation whose annual revenue could buy entire countries. And she was its leader, its missing leader. "I didn't want this weekend to be about that," she continued, her voice soft and pained. "I didn't want the title to come first. I didn't want you to look at me and see a position instead of a person. So I hid it. I hid everything." Her eyes shimmered with something like regret, but before Ethan could respond, the guard took a step forward. "Miss Alexandra, we truly cannot wait. They have already started the final session. If they finalize the vote, your power as CEO will dissolve." Alexandra nodded, wiping her palms on her jeans as though grounding herself. Then she turned to Ethan with a look he would never forget. "I need you with me," she whispered. "I know you barely know me, and I've hidden more than I've told you, but I need you with me today. Just stand beside me. I don't want to walk into that room alone." Ethan searched her face. She wasn't a millionaire's daughter trying to impress people. She wasn't a spoiled heiress running from responsibility. She was someone forced into a world where every gesture mattered, where trust was rare, and where loneliness came dressed in luxury. Someone who had asked a mechanic to be her date because she wanted one normal weekend, one place where she wasn't a target or a symbol or a threat. He nodded slowly. "I'm here," he said, voice steady. "I'm with you." Her breath steadied at his words, and she grabbed his hand again, leading him through the hallways at a pace that matched her racing pulse. The mansion's corridors twisted like a maze, filled with murmuring guests still whispering about her unexpected appearance. The guard stayed close, guiding them through a side exit that led to a courtyard filled with sleek black cars and polished stone tiles. A second security team waited by one of the vehicles. They saluted her immediately, and the door swung open. She climbed in first, pulling Ethan in after her. The car lurched forward, speeding toward the Kingswell headquarters downtown. Inside the car, the silence was thick. Alexandra stared straight ahead, her hands gripping the edge of the seat until her knuckles turned pale. Ethan watched her carefully. She looked like someone balancing on a tightrope stretched over fire. Someone who knew one wrong move meant losing everything. "What's happening exactly?" he asked gently. She swallowed. "The board hates me," she said in a small voice. "My father built Kingswell. When he passed away last year, I inherited everything. But not everyone agreed with that. Some wanted someone else in charge, someone older, someone they could manipulate." "You're not someone who gets manipulated," Ethan said softly. Her lips twitched. "That's exactly why they want me gone." The guard in the passenger seat spoke without turning. "The acting chairman is Harold Trent. He's been planning this for months. He wants full control, and he's using your weekend absence as an excuse to vote you out." Ethan felt a surge of anger on her behalf. She wasn't just fighting for a title. She was fighting people who wanted to erase her entirely. "Why didn't you tell me any of this earlier?" he asked. She looked down, twisting her fingers together. "Because I wanted one evening, just one, where someone liked me for me." He reached over and gently took her hand, and she inhaled sharply as if surprised by her own relief. The car sped through the city, and soon the towering structure of Kingswell Industries rose into view. The building was a monument of glass and steel, shimmering under the afternoon sun. It looked cold, powerful, intimidating, and waiting for her. The moment the car stopped, Alexandra stepped out with Ethan at her side. Employees in suits froze as they saw her, whispers sweeping through the lobby like wind through tall grass. Some looked startled, some looked fearful. A few looked furious. Security cleared a path as she marched toward the elevator. Her grip on Ethan's hand tightened with every step. When the doors closed behind them, locking them alone in the confined space, she finally spoke again. "When we walk in there," she whispered, "whatever happens, just stay near me. Please." He nodded. "I will." The elevator doors slid open to the top floor. A sea of executives stood waiting. Tension crackled like lightning. Papers clutched in fists. Cold stares. A circle of powerful people surrounding a large conference table. At the head of it stood Harold Trent. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing the moment he saw Alexandra. "So," he said, voice dripping with satisfaction, "you finally decided to show up." Alexandra lifted her chin, but her hand trembled in Ethan's. "Let's get this over with," Harold smiled, dark and confident. "I couldn't agree more." And with that, the doors closed behind them. The tension inside the boardroom was so thick, Ethan felt it settle on his skin like dust. Alexandra stepped forward first, her shoulders pulled back, her chin high, but he saw the tremor in her hands as she released his fingers. Her confidence was real, but it wasn't effortless. It was carved out of fear and pressure and responsibility she never asked for, but could not abandon. Executives turned as she entered, their expressions shifting from shock to irritation to thinly veiled hostility. They weren't expecting her. Worse, they weren't happy she had come. Harold Trent stood at the head of the long, polished table, his posture relaxed, his smile sharp. He wore the kind of suit that was tailored not just to his body, but to his ambition, with cufflinks that glinted under the cold, fluorescent lights. The man radiated arrogance. It was in the way he didn't bow his head like the others had. It was in the way he looked at Alexandra, as if she were a child who had interrupted adults discussing important matters. "Well," Harold said slowly, folding his hands in front of him, "I suppose miracles do happen. Our missing CEO has finally decided to join us." A few board members exchanged uneasy glances. Others smirked. None looked surprised by his condescending tone. Alexandra stepped into the open space near the table, every eye fixed on her. Ethan stayed one step behind her, not close enough to overshadow her, but near enough to let her know he wasn't going anywhere. "I called for no meeting," Alexandra said, her voice steady but icy. "Your actions over the last 48 hours are unconstitutional and a direct violation of the company's leadership charter." Harold chuckled under his breath. "Is that so you've been absent all this time? Unreachable, unseen, unaccounted for? And you think you can waltz in here, bring your guest," he added with a pointed glance at Ethan, "and act as if nothing is amiss? You left us no choice." Alexandra ignored the jab. "You know exactly why I left. I have been available to every department head. My leave was temporary and approved by the board. This meeting, however, was not." Harold leaned forward with a theatrical sigh. "Alexandra, please. We both know what this is. You inherited a throne you were never prepared to sit on. Kingswell needs strong leadership, not a runaway girl who spends her weekends playing normal life with random mechanics." The insult sliced through the air. Ethan's jaw clenched, but Alexandra raised a hand subtly, as if telling him she was fine. But he could tell the words hit her, hard. A woman from the finance division cleared her throat nervously. "Harold, perhaps this isn't the time for personal remarks." "Oh, but it is," Harold said smoothly. "Because this company is crumbling under her direction. Revenue is unstable. Staff morale is evaporating. Investors are whispering about pulling out. Alexandra's leadership is an experiment that has failed, and it is time we accept reality." Ethan looked around the room. Some of the board members nodded along, but several shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to meet Alexandra's eyes. Not everyone believed Harold, but he was persuasive, dangerous, and clearly prepared. Alexandra lifted her head. "You're lying," she said quietly. "Revenue is stable, morale is documented, and investor reports were filed 3 days ago showing no decline." "Everything you just said is fabricated," Harold smirked. "Prove it." She reached inside her bag and pulled out a stack of documents, neatly clipped together. She set them on the table, and several board members leaned in immediately. "These are the reports you tried to hide," she said calmly. "The ones you manipulated. And these, she added, pulling out a small flash drive, contain audio recordings of your meetings with external partners discussing illegal transactions. You misdirected funds from Kingswell into private accounts overseas. The room went dead silent. Harold's expression faltered for the first time. His jaw twitched. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, but the confidence in his voice cracked ever so slightly. Alexandra stepped closer to him, her eyes steady. "I know everything. I've known for weeks. I was waiting for you to make your final move. So I let you believe I was gone. I let you start the takeover. I let you expose yourself." Her words rolled across the room like thunder. A board member at the far end rose abruptly. "If this is true, then Harold should be removed immediately pending investigation." Others stood in agreement. Murmurs broke out everywhere. Panic flickered across Harold's face before he masked it with anger. "You set me up," he hissed. "I didn't need to," Alexandra replied. "You set yourself up long before I ever took this role." Security entered the boardroom on cue, summoned by Alexandra's silent signal. They approached Harold, and for a moment he looked like he might try something reckless. But the fight drained out of him as two uniformed men stepped beside him, one taking his arm. Harold glared at Ethan on his way out, fury burning behind his eyes. "So this is your influence," Harold spat venomously. "A nobody mechanic at your side while you destroy the company your father built." Ethan didn't react. He didn't flinch. He didn't rise to the insult. He simply held Alexandra's gaze as she answered softly, "I don't need a CEO at my side. I need someone real." Harold was escorted out, his protests echoing down the hall, leaving the room buzzing with shock. Once the noise quieted, the lead board member cleared her throat. "Miss Alexandra, the board stands with you. You have our full support moving forward." There was no bowing now, no pretending. They didn't respect her because she was young. They respected her because she was unshakable. Alexandra released a long breath, shoulders sagging with relief. For the first time that day, she looked like someone who could finally breathe again. Board members filed out one by one until the room was empty. Alexandra stood alone in the silence, staring at the table where she had just saved her company. When she finally turned to Ethan, her expression was small, fragile, deeply human. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Our weekend date turned into a war." Ethan stepped close, tipping her chin gently so she met his eyes. "It was never just a weekend for me." She blinked, stunned. Then, what was it? "It was the beginning of something real," he said softly. "Something I don't want to walk away from." Her breath caught. For a moment she looked like she had no words left. Then she reached for him with hands that no longer trembled because she wasn't alone anymore. "So what are you saying?" she whispered, barely able to breathe. He smiled. "I'm saying I want whatever comes next. With you, all of it." Tears filled her eyes, but her smile was luminous, fragile, overwhelmed. "Then I choose you," she whispered. "Not because I'm a CEO, not because I'm afraid, not because I need protection. I choose you because for the first time in my life, someone saw me." He wrapped his arms around her as she leaned into him, and the world she carried on her shoulders softened just enough for her to feel human again. The war was over, but their story was just beginning.